guys talking, rush two guys talking, rush two guys talking, rush two guys talking, rush two guys.
And now, get ready for the Two Guys Talking Rush podcast with your hosts, John Kane and Dan Buxton.
This is show number 6 of the Two Guys Talking Rush podcast, part 2 of a series of shows we'll be having called Behind the Lighted Stage. It's about production. It's about the road show, the Rush road show. And boy, we learned a lot, Dan, from last week.
Yes, we did. Quite a lot more than I was expecting, in fact. No, but I mean, that sort of thing to me is a big selling point of, why I like to do this show, is we get to find out all this stuff that was happening behind the scenes that we may not necessarily have known, but that was essential to Rush happening. So it's good to have an opportunity to shine a light on these people, especially when their industry is kind of in the dumps right now.
Yeah, exactly. And sweet.
Yes, we did. Quite a lot more than I was expecting, in fact. No, but I mean, that sort of thing to me is a big selling point of, why I like to do this show, is we get to find out all this stuff that was happening behind the scenes that we may not necessarily have known, but that was essential to Rush happening. So it's good to have an opportunity to shine a light on these people, especially when their industry is kind of in the dumps right now.
Yeah, exactly. And, I also, before I forget, Dan, I wanted to thank the actual participants for episode number 4. Sorry, I was spacing there for a minute. The Women of Rush show has been a huge success. We've heard a lot of feedback from that show. And, I forgot to thank those participants last episode. So I wanted to thank Donna Halper, Annie Zaleski, Eddie Maxwell, Kelly D. It was a great show. We've got a lot of good feedback. In fact, you saw some little kind of issue on the old social media regarding our show.
We got invoked in a Facebook argument on the Rush Fanatics group, where a woman started a topic saying something like, "Are we done with this whole stereotypical notion that women don't like Rush?" And just somewhere, it became contentious, like within seconds, and then many responses down, someone just pasted in the link to our Women in Rush show and it's like, well, you tell me. So good.
Yeah. So people are actually referencing our show as well, it's a source of information, and however people use it is fine with me. So how was your week, Dan? The weather here in New Hampshire has been better. It hasn't been as sweltering. How are you doing where you are?
It's not bad. I'm just slammed with work and haven't really been able to go and enjoy the great outdoors much.
Yeah.
But money. So yay.
Yeah. Well, gotta work, gotta bring in the dough.
Sadly. Yeah.
So we're at show number 6. This is another milestone. Each show is a milestone as far as let's see how long we can keep this machine going. But the downloads have been good and people have been enjoying it. So
I feel like this is going to continue for a while. It's getting the thing you have to get past is always the second show.
Yes.
If you can get past the second show, you'll probably be okay.
Yeah.
And there's also the comedy rule of 3.
Right.
Once you're past all that, then it's like, okay, I think this is a thing. This is now happening.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you how many bands I joined that lasted 1 practice, played 2 shows, and then it's over.
Yeah.
So, but we get to do this from the comfort and safety of our own homes. So
this is true. Yeah. This is true. And I did hear from your agent, and you told me you received my rider, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. All right. Good,
no brown M&Ms.
which was myth. No, that was a test to see if actually people listen to. That's right, the Van Halen story. It's funny. I'm looking. I've been digging into my archives and stuff, and I have a first album on 8-track. Yes, I'm like, it's really bright blue with the pink pink font. So if anybody is listening right now, hopefully there are a few. I'm holding up in Rush, the debut album 8-track, which I've ever seen very rare. I've very rarely seen these around, so I grabbed it.
My folks, when I grew up, did not really listen to a whole lot of music, so there was not a lot of media around. So there were never any 8-tracks in our house. But I always found those things like so clunky, and like the whole way that they worked, and they would just cut off songs and stuff like that.
The 8-track technology sucked. It was sucky.
It's surprising to me that it lasted as long as it did. But
but this looks pretty.
Yeah, it's lovely.
And we have a YouTube channel, folks, Two Guys Talking Rush YouTube channel, where we actually film these episodes, and you can watch us make fools of ourselves.
Yes.
But
I shave for these episodes. So
you look damn good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
We're because sex sells, and that's why people tune into our show is because we're handsome.
Well, I didn't want to say, but you did. The shaving makes you much more sexier.
I'll say, definitely.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible, Dan.
Yes.
How sexy you are. Another little thing is, this isn't a collectible, but at some point I decided to put the Grace Under Pressure era photo of Rush in a frame, because and it's like the family photo,
Total Sears portrait studio right there.
So I got that framed. They're looking at me right now. Okay.
Do you know the story about that photo?
No, tell me.
Oh, I can't remember. They were working with some very old photographer who is this legendary guy. I cannot remember his name.
Yes.
But he wanted to get them lit in a certain way for the photo.
Yep.
And they did, like, the lights that they have didn't operate that way. And the man goes, "That is not an answer that I can accept." And that became a thing that the guys in Rush said for a while after that, whenever anything, they were saying it as a joke, but whenever anything would come up that was not quite the way they wanted it, they would go, "That is not an answer that I can accept."
That's funny. That's Signals, isn't it? Is that Signals or Grace? It's Grace.
Grace. That exact photo that you have
Grace.
framed.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Yeah, all right, interesting. Well, we love Rush. That's why we're doing this. And we want to just kind of fill your ears up on your drive to work, or your man cave time, or whatever you're doing.
Woman cave time.
Woman cave, man cave, she cave.
Yes. Teen cave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We want to just give you some good info and talk for a solid hour about our favorite band. Yeah. Just get it out of our system, really. So
that's going to happen. Like it's ever going to be out of our system.
I know. I think about Rush all the time, I guess. Yeah. Here we're continuing on with this series, Behind the Lighted Stage, and we had some wonderful guests, and it was such an informative show. Sebastien Richard, automation, lighting, motion control. Brent Carpenter, head monitor engineer. Clifford Sharpling, lead carpenter, rigger. Arthur McLear, lead truck driver. Hopefully I'm not missing anybody. I think I got
you got everybody.
All. Yeah, great guys, and we'll continue with that second part of that episode in a minute or so. But it was just such an incredible panel. And for those who are listening, you can hear our podcast on TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Simplecast, and others. Another shout out to the rushradio.org people. Listen to Rush Radio on the TuneIn app. A shout out to Why Not, helping with our intro music. And again, we want to hear from fans.
Yes.
Dan, I think it's important to tap into those people out there that are just heavy duty fans like us. Yeah. And if you feel like you want to be on the show, want to share a Rush story, give us feedback on the show, on the topics or possible future topics, email us at twoguystalkingrush@gmail.com. Our website is www.twoguystalkingrush.com. Did I say the email right? 2guystalkingrush@gmail.com. And our website is www.2guystalkingrush.com. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Twitter. And what else? Our YouTube channel, of course. And please subscribe to that. The social media, it's
such a bother.
It's so laborious. I know.
Yeah.
Just find us out there. You just look.
Yeah. We're not there because we want to be, okay? We're not on social media because we want to be.
I know. I got to spell this
so you can find us. That's it. Okay?
I got to spell this out for you people. Just find Two Guys Talking Rush.
Find us. Help.
Oh man, I got to handhold and baby step you all. Come on, we're on the damn computer, as my mother would say. The computer, the one computer. Yeah, the one.
Are you on the Google machine? Is that where you are?
Exactly.
Yeah.
My grandfather-in-law said that he called Google for something.
If only that were possible, because I would sure like to call them sometimes and be like, we have some issues here.
I'm on the phone with the Google right now.
I'm on hold with the Googles. I hate this hold music.
That's so funny. Well, as we do each week, brief this week in Rush history, or this day in Rush history. Today is August 20th. Rush in 1974 played the Stanley Theater in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on the Rush tour. That must have been incredible. 1976 they played the McElroy Auditorium in Waterloo, Iowa on the All the World's a Stage tour. In 1977 they played the Arena in Sudbury, Ontario on the Farewell to Kings tour. Wow. Oh, imagine going to see the Farewell to Kings tour.
That would have been nice.
I love that album.
Yeah.
In 2000, sampling the opening of 2112 Overture, Let the Music Play, Plasmic Honey 2000 ad remix by Shannon was released. Okay. Wow. 2000. I'm unfamiliar with that. 2008, the film.
As am I.
Well, now we'll have to look into that. 2008, the film The Rocker was released. Although cut from the theatrical release, a deleted scene references Neil Peart. 2010, Rush played the Intrust Bank Arena in Wichita, Kansas on the Time Machine Tour. In 2011, the Rush transcript archive was added to the Power Windows website. That's a very good website. Check that website out if you haven't, folks. Yeah. 2014, two characters on the television series The Bridge Party. Two characters on the television series The Bridge Party to the Spirit of Radio. And that ends that week in Rush history. And it's all related to this show and future shows where we'll be discussing next week with a very special guest about Rush kind of venturing in or expanding into the popular culture universe. And we'll talk more about that on our next episode. What are some of your favorite Alex Lifeson solos, Dan? Do you have any?
Well, I mean, the first one that ever grabbed me, and really, honestly, what made me a Rush fan in the first place is the one on Free Will. There's this one section, like a few seconds into it, where he just suddenly starts playing like really, really, really fast, and you probably know which one I'm talking about. And I just remember my head turning as soon as that happened towards the stereo. That's when they got me. Later, I realized that's not an Alex Lifeson solo. That's all three of them going completely nuts at the same time, but it doesn't sound chaotic at all. You hear it as a guitar solo.
Yeah.
But all of them are just completely going off. So there's a lot there. Yeah. My God,
there's so many.
Spirit of Radio is a great one.
It's a beautiful one. Yeah. One of my favorites is, you could go on and on and on.
So that's a whole show right there.
Well, there's an engagement here, and I have a new favorite guitar solo that we'll talk about. We've talked about it before, but I think one of my all-time favorite guitar solos is Analog Kid.
Yes,
it's so jazzy, and it's almost like it's very improv-ish. It's a great guitar solo, and I just was listening to that song again the other day.
That is a great guitar song, just in general. From the opening riff, like literally to the last note, like all of it is just. Wow, my God, are you listening to this guy?
No.
And I mean, that's been my reaction to just a lot of his playing, is like, because he doesn't get as much credit as he should.
Yeah.
Just he's a little left field in a lot of his choices, and he also doesn't mind receding into the background slightly if that's what the music calls for.
Yeah.
You don't forget about him, but he's okay with like being part of the texture if that's what the song calls for.
Yeah.
But then he's able to also just jump out and be, it's like, oh my God, who the hell is this guy? Maybe the guitar solo on Spirit of Radio on Exit Stage Left.
Yeah.
Might be one of the best, but I mean, my God, this is like,
it's
like
a wormhole.
It's like asking me to choose my favorite kid. I mean, I've never heard him play something, gone like, I don't know about that. That's not, you will never hear that from him.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a point to this engagement, but I remember we used to have a music store called Mars Music here in New England. I don't know if you had any in New York, and they used to have, a guitarist would go in and, guitarists are always trying to figure out the sound of a guitarist that they admire or look up to. And Mars did a great kind of infographic on all the effects that each, Jimmy Page would have on his guitar, Hendrix, Eddie Van Halen, and they had an Alex Lifeson configuration, how to get the Alex Lifeson sound. And I remember always looking at that, and hearing guitarists and Mars Music kind of tapping into these, plugging in and noodling as they would in the guitar area of the music store. But
you can't really like reduce him to a pedal, though. It's not like a lot of guitar players are just like on off, where it's like they have their rhythm sound, they have their lead sound, and that's it, and that's all they do.
Yeah,
he really made a variety of choices over the years, and I really appreciate that he made an effort not to repeat himself.
Yeah,
he made an effort to really try to cover as much ground as possible.
You could pick out a Lifeson sound out of the 80s Rush compared to the 70s or 90s Rush, no?
Yeah, but I mean, still nothing that you could reduce to an effects pedal. There's just maybe one of those like huge effects racks or something like that.
Right.
But the sound changed also. Like the sound he had in the 70s was different from the one he had in the early 80s, which was different from the one in the late 80s. But that's the band. They were always in a state of movement. You could never pin them down.
Right.
The songwriting was always excellent. The performances were always excellent. That was what was consistent about them, but they never wanted to repeat themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a lot of why we still care, and that's a lot of why we're still interested.
Yeah. Well, and actually my reference to the 80s, being able to pick out 80s Alex sound, is that there were probably less guitar solos at that point, but still his sound was evident. Well, we've been hearing a lot about favorite albums, or asking that question of a lot of fans that are on the show, and several times already Clockwork Angels has come up as a favorite album. I was just talking to a friend of mine that might be on a future show, and great guy, and we were talking about favorite albums, and he just loves Clockwork Angels. And I think probably has a lot to do with it being their final album, being so good. And of course, a different album than other albums. It's not the early Rush. It's not the 80s Rush. It's not even the 90s Rush. It's a different sounding album to me. But I love it a lot. And I think I love it even more as I listen to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it takes on a lot more significance now, being the last one. But I mean, Rush have some albums that I do not care for.
Yeah.
I would never call them bad albums, because they're not. So much thought went into them, and they never phoned anything in. So I would separate it between like albums that I love and albums that where I don't really get it.
Yeah.
Clockwork Angels is firmly in the first category, but because it comes so late in the catalog, you don't think of it first necessarily.
Right.
And so I was a little surprised when we had a couple of guests who would pick that as their favorite album. But I've gone back to it since, and it's like,
it's great.
This is as good as anything.
So good.
He did, yeah.
Well, one of my favorite solos is in the song "The Garden."
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk a little bit more about "The Garden" as a song, but also the album "Clockwork Angels," and some little kind of details about that album and history on that album. So it's Rush's 20th and final studio album. We all know that. They recorded at Blackbird Studios in Nashville, the first 2 singles, and then traveled back north, finishing up in Toronto at Revolution Recording. The album is heralded as their return to roots and a final true concept album, coming 5 years after Snakes and Arrows. And I like Clockwork Angels a lot more than I like Snakes. There's a lot of things I like about Snakes and Arrows, but I think Clockwork Angels is a much better album, as a unit, as a kind of a whole.
Oh, like it just sort of hangs together a little better?
I think so. I mean, there's things about Snakes and Arrows that I don't love. I mean, there's some songs on there that are incredible,
Yeah.
And of course the instrumentals are great. Each track was part of a larger chronicle telling of a young man chasing his dreams in a dystopian steampunk world filled with alchemy, fire, and industry. The album would also be turned into a novel by author Kevin J. Anderson in 2012. The tour, did you see that tour? I just forget.
I did not.
No, okay. It was a great tour. 2012, Clockwork Angels by Canadian rock band Rush. The tour included shows in Canada, the United States, and throughout Europe, featuring a 9-piece string ensemble that accompanied the band during the second set of each performance, which highlighted the songs from Clockwork Angels. That was incredible. Seeing Rush play with a string ensemble was unique and really kind of beefed up the music,
99% of the time, by the way, I'm totally against that. I think if you want to ruin rock and roll, put an orchestra behind it. I cannot tell you how sad I am that became like a thing.
Yeah.
Where like Kiss with an orchestra, the Scorpions with an orchestra. Never helped ever.
Yeah.
This is one exception to that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, but they're not like really in your face with it. It just sort of supports the music instead of really overtaking.
Yeah, it was never over the top. It was always kind of like in the background. And I think for this special moment in time, it worked. It was quite elegant. Well, the song "The Garden," I was just talking about this with that same individual that will be on a future show, about the garden being the final track, and how this album, if you keep going back to it, you find new things about it that relate to Neil's passing. I haven't thought about that enough to have anything definitive to say about it, other than there's something else there with Clockwork Angels that is below the surface of it just being their final album. There's something else to it that speaks to how Rush went out. Almost like they knew it was, they just knew this is it,
Probably.
Yeah. You know what I mean? From the very, very get-go, that this would be the final and last effort. And I think that the song "The Garden" speaks to that. Producer Nick Raskulinecz told Music Radar that "The Garden" was in the first batch of songs and it came pretty easily. It's probably the most beautiful song on the album, he says. It's reflective. It's the end of the journey, and it's got a long outro. Originally, we were going to fade it out, he says, but it has such power the way it was, we decided against it. The final Rush studio song, "The Garden," was the final Rush studio song that was ever recorded. Some claim it's the perfect melodic song to end an incredible 40-year stint in rock and roll. What a way to go out.
Yeah.
I was going through we're going to listen to a little bit of "The Garden" in a second, in particular solo, but and this is extracted from YouTube, of course, but the fan feed, I always like to read the comments. We've talked about that before, the comments below a video. And this is what some people say about "The Garden." They say the song takes on a whole different level of meaning with Neil's passing. Rest in peace, Neil. I'm devastated by the loss of a musician whose lyrics have been with me since I was 13. I am now 45. I'm in tears. Someone writes, "My dad had died right around the time this album came out. He always used to say, 'It is what it is.' The song both crushed me and saved me, helped me understand it, helped me to get through it. Maybe it'll help again. R.I.P. Neil Peart. The measure of life is a measure of love and respect, and we have so much of this from you, Neil." Well, Neil's lyrics, as some folks have referenced, they touch on a level of humanism that have been threaded throughout his entire writing career. If you look far enough back, it's only come into kind of into the surface now that we're trying to better understand who Neil Peart was as a drummer, as a lyricist, that we're now kind of looking at what did Neil actually mean in some of these lyrics. Anyway, it's neither here nor there, but what is your take on Neil and his non-religious or religious views, spiritual views in his writing?
I think, I mean, I never met the guy. It's very important to state that up front.
Yes, neither have I.
But just, from what I've seen in interviews and reading his lyrics and all that sort of thing, he seemed to always be, Donna Halper, our, returning champion, who's been on the show a couple of times now, described him as a humanist, which is true. But I feel like a lot of it, it comes from a place of doubt, like that he wants to always be a little bit of a skeptic and not fully buy in to anything. I think his perception of himself is like a very solitary person, which he talks about in Circumstances. There's a few songs where you get the sense that in life, he was always kind of like standing away from everybody and watching. He was kind of an observer. And I think if you're the kind of person who feels that way in life, you don't necessarily attach to absolutes. You believe a lot more in what you see, and in what you believe in what's in front of you, as opposed to maybe there's some other thing. He never seemed to 100% discount the possibility that there was more. Also, I think just he almost had like a science. He's called the professor.
Yeah,
but I felt like almost like a scientist's healthy skepticism about everything.
Yeah,
and you can really see that pretty much in everything he wrote. He never there was always this kind, like a little bit of standoffishness in everything. He was not the kind of guy who would have written like, "I love you, come back to me.
Right.
I can't stop drinking while you're gone." That never would have come out of him. And I can't really compare the lyrics that he wrote to anyone else's. He was the only game in town, as far as I'm concerned, who we could have this kind of a discussion about.
Yeah. Well, and Donna mentioned humanism, and for those who don't know what humanism is, humanism or humanists are those that believe that the human experience and rational thinking provide the only source of both knowledge and moral code to live by. Humanism is a democratic and ethical life stance which affirms that human beings have the right and responsibility to give meaning and shape to their own lives. Very much, Neil.
Totally.
In his writing. There's an article that came out by writer Greg Camp in the Humanist.com website in 2016. I found it very interesting. I won't read all of it, but hope is what remains. Rush drummer and lyricist Neil Peart has long explored humanistic themes. The accusation, he says, often leveled by fundamentalist believers in various religions, is that a life without deities has no worth. And Peart answers this directly. Worth is what we make it, and it's our job to engage in the making. Peart draws his humanist themes together in the closing song on Clockwork Angels, The Garden. Here, he directly refers to Voltaire's Candide, almost quoting Candide's statement, also used by Leonard Nimoy in his last tweet shortly before his death, that regardless of grand notions about reality, we must cultivate our garden.
You're never going to get a lyricist who quotes both Voltaire and Leonard Nimoy in the same song. That will never happen again.
It's pretty incredible.
Confident making that prognosis.
We can only listen to a little bit of it, but I wanted to just listen to the solo. The Alex Lifeson music writer goes on to say the Lifeson guitar solo you hear on the record is the original one he recorded for the demo. That's the demo guitar solo. What you're hearing is Alex by himself, said Raskulinets to Music Radar. He's at Geddy's house. It's late at night. I think Geddy was sleeping on the couch, and he's just playing a guitar solo. When you get something that great, Raskulinets says, it's not a demo anymore.
Yeah.
There wasn't even a discussion to try to do it again. So we'll listen to the solo.
The future disappears into memory without what remains to be seen. Forever dwells in that moment. Hope is what remains to be seen.
That was recorded in Dallas on the Clockwork Angels tour. Well, Dan, we have to get on with our show.
Yes.
And we want to thank all of our fans for tuning in again. And we want to thank our upcoming panel for joining us. This is part 2 of Two Guys Talking Rush podcast, Behind the Lighted Stage. But I'd like to shed light on something here, is that in reference to, and this will lead into a question from Mac, is going back in those early days. Sorry, Mac, I don't mean to keep referring to you and saying olden days and early days, but you're my anchor, man. But you know, in my research and this is not a plug for my book, but because I've studied a little bit on the history of concert sound and production, that, let's say, for rigging, you know, I interviewed guys who were at Madison Square Garden in 1968, 69, hanging trusses with no safety lines at all. And one of the guys I interviewed said it was the year that EMS opened up, Eastern Mountain Sports. And they said if you fell 200 feet from a ceiling, they just walk right over you. You were just dead meat on the floor, right? So this guy says, I go out to Eastern Mountain Sports and we buy mountain climbing trusses, you know, like the ones you would dangle from, and they would use that in the early days, harnesses for early hanging from the ceilings of these arenas. With regard to hanging speakers in a splayed or what's the damn word? It'll come to me. Array. Yes, hanging them in an array. This is a new thing in the 1960s. So you'll see mostly speakers on scaffolding, but when they're hung, it wasn't often. And the reason and the origins, from what I studied, is that the seats. The promoter wanted more people in the seats. If you put stacks in front of seats, people can't see. So let's lift them up. But it made sense also from a sound perspective to project that sound outward. So here's the subject of my book, Bill Hanley, with regard to the winches, the motors that you use in the hang trusses. It's now, if you go on the CM website, there's a whole line of entertainment winches. There's a whole, I forget what they call them, showmans or something like that. With no mention of the history or origins of these things. I mean, of course, winches always existed, but Hanley, Mac, you'll like this. He reverses the connections of the winch, so the chain, what it does now, it climbs up on itself. And at Madison Square Garden, you can see this on the Rolling Stones '69 tour, in the Maisley Brothers film, Give Me Shelter, and in some photos, that the speakers are in baskets. Hanley speakers are in baskets. He did I think there were 2 or 3 of those shows. And I interviewed 2 of the former superintendents of Madison Square Garden. They were in their 90s, man. I don't even know if they're still around, but they remembered Hanley. They had to call a architectural designer or someone to come out to make sure that the ceiling of Madison Square Garden could hold the load of these speakers out. And this is a new thing. CM Wench sends Hanley a letter. It says, we are not liable for any disaster that may occur because of these things. So my point is that all these production elements that we're talking about now are not that, I mean, this is a new thing. It's only now that we've got these tours, these massive tours, these big bands, where we're now kind of at a level of standard where everything is systemized in a way that's automated, at a level of standard for safety and things like that. But boy, by comparison, when I hear these stories of you guys, and thinking back, like it wasn't that long ago that there was just this guy that was joining the circus and on a Eastern Mountain Sports harness, and Bill Hanley redesigning the connectors of a CM winch to make it do the job for the show. But Arthur, by 1977-78, national touring was at its gate. It's going. 10 years prior, we had more regional tours, smaller tours. It wasn't the big national tours like we have now. So take us back and even shed light on what it is that you did. I mean, how did you do it? What did you go? You went to a warehouse, picked up the equipment. Did you get notified that there was a tour coming? And then what? Unions fill the truck and then you're off, or are you putting together a team? Tell us about what you do as a lead trucker, or how you ended up in that position.
Well, before the trucking, when I was doing sound, it was 71 to 75 that I did sound.
Right.
And in those days, Bill Hanley was the only guy doing anything like that. We always just stacked our speakers on the stage. I don't know if you've been to shows at the Orpheum in Boston.
Oh yeah, saw my first show there.
Well, they nowadays they load in the front door on the street, load in the front door, and ramp up to the stage. In the old days, there was a dumpster in the alley, and we had to back the truck in to the alley, lift the stuff up onto the dumpster, and then lift it up into the backstage area.
That's horrible.
And then stack all the speakers up. So that's what we did. You would just stack the speakers, stack one speaker on top of the other, and we wouldn't do it. Your rigging wasn't even in the wheelhouse for us. It was too early in the game in the early 70s to even think about that. But then when rigging came in and the big boys took the Showco and Claire and the big companies came in, we were done. That was it. We couldn't keep up with it. It's we didn't have the money, and they had mega bucks to experiment with all this stuff.
Yeah. And then trucking, how your transition into trucking, how does one begin in that, and what do you do?
Well, I was the last tour I did on sound was Joan Baez. It's her biggest tour. We had about 5 trucks, I think, on that. In 75, that was quite a few trucks. And I used to travel with the driver. The driver taught me how to drive, and that was pretty much it. And so that at 75, and in those days, when the new sound companies came in, and they not new sound companies, but when they went to the rigging, that was it. That was it for us. So I went right over to trucking, and I had the whole day off then. Just had to work at night, so I was on the night shift, and I enjoyed it. I didn't have to worry about a lot of different worries, but the worry about putting the sound system together and hoping it worked, I didn't have to worry about that anymore.
The schlepping, right? The schlepping.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So, but long drives, right? I mean, you're driving for hours, right? How long are you driving for? Is there long in the early days? Is it a long travel time? Is it get shorter?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in the early days, there weren't that many rules. You had to write up a logbook, but if you wanted to drive some more, you just rip up a logbook and start a new one. Now it's all electronic, and you can't get away with that anymore. So, you're limited to 10 hours a day, and then you got to, take 10 hours off. So it's changed quite a bit,
Yeah, most definitely, man. Also, getting into the unions, which we won't do, but a lot of people don't know that you have to work with unions to do your job. So that's a whole other topic of conversation. Of course, we don't want to forget the unions and the work that they do to keep the shows going. And if anybody wants to shed light on that, you can, but you don't have to.
I'll actually
go ahead.
I'll get on something there.
Go.
We like, all of us that do this for a living, that live the circus life that we do, can attest that every building we go into, just about the regular buildings that you see all the time, there's a group of stagehands that you love to see. We all have friends that work in these buildings, and I don't want to just leave it at that. There are things about the union as a whole that become frustrating for us. At 4.5 hours, when I finally have my points to fly the PA and I have to give up my 2 guys to go to lunch, and I get 2 other guys that now don't know what we're doing, that's frustration. I don't get a guaranteed lunch at 4.5 hours. I don't get a guaranteed coffee break at 2 hours. And I'm not bitching about the unions. So don't take it as that. But, and Mac will remember, and Cliff may, the Spectrum in Philadelphia when it was still a building. You had to deal with 4 unions. There was the Teamsters that pulled your crap off the truck. Between the top of the ramp of your truck, because everything was backed into this long hallway, between the top of the ramp of your truck and this nebulous yellow line about 15 feet away, the gear had to be pushed by the hotel and hospitality workers.
Wow.
Where then you would get a stagehand, an IA stagehand that could bring it to you, and much like MSG, if it was forward of the stage, you had to have IBEW help you assemble it.
Electrical.
Yeah, the electrical unit.
Yeah.
And so that level of differentiation became very frustrating, and still is frustrating, because today we've got Philadelphia where we're dealing with 4, and then if you start throwing caterers in and building people, now you've got a whole other 2 unions to deal with. That's on a different side than me, obviously. But then tomorrow we're in Charleston, West Virginia, where it's, rent a drunk labor service, and everybody does everything, and half of them do nothing. So you end up doing most of the work yourself anyway. So I don't want to bag on anybody, but as a touring guy, I can tell you that is one of the frustrations of local labor. Some days you get people that know your gear as well as you do. Some days you get gear where you get people where they've never seen a show, let alone worked one, and everything in between. So that's really, I think, all I can say. And Cliff had to deal with it a little bit more than I did, because he, being on the last tour, George had kind of resigned himself that Cliff was our de facto stage manager. He's who we went to for everything. Love George, whatever, but Cliff was who we called for our stage hands, and is the carpet down and all the things we needed to know, moving trucks in and out. That was all Cliffy.
No, I mean, I get not wanting to bag on unions, because they are there for a reason and they do serve a purpose. But yeah, that's annoying as hell, I'm sure. And there's no dressing that up. If you have to deal with like 4 to 6 different groups of people, and I'm assuming there has to be some kind of liaison between those people, and maybe that person is in their own union. And, it's just very complicated when it sounds like all you want to do is drag this thing from here to here, and you have to involve teams of people to do that. That's a legitimate grievance, but I get not wanting to bag on them at the same time, because they do serve a purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I have a whole chapter in the Hanley book, again, on MSG and unions, working with the unions, and how difficult it was for a sound company to come in and be able to just efficiently set up the equipment, and how costly it could be for the sound company, and for promoters and things like that if things didn't run efficiently. So it's a complex situation that's gone on for a very long time, I think.
I know some very committed lefties. I know some very committed lefties who, they're extremely pro-union. They're like, as soon as we lost the unions in this country, everything went to hell. And then one day they work with a union, and they come home and they're like, oh, these goddamn unions, Jesus Christ. So I get it. I understand.
But I also know, I have friends that are in IATSE and IBEW that love rock and roll, that take their jobs very seriously, and they're there to help and to do the job. as far as people exploiting it, I mean, I don't know. I can only imagine what you guys must have dealt with from each show to each show and having to work around that. So
yeah, rent a drunk does not sound better. That does not sound like an improvement on
sounds
unions.
terrible.
Yeah.
So any tours that stick out in your mind as like the best and most favorite tour, and why?
Everybody's gonna say Rush.
Well, I mean any best or favorite Rush tour. Sorry, I should have. Someone's going to be like Def Leppard. No, I mean, Rush. Any best or favorite Rush tour that sticks out that you love the most?
I'd say all of them. The one I hated the most was definitely the last one because, I mean, nobody at the very end, nobody expected this to end. Like it just hit us in the face. Like, wow, what's going on?
Wow.
Especially like when we saw Neil get up and go wave to the crowd in the front on the very last show. Everybody was looking at each other like, what is he doing?
Uh-huh.
So everybody knew like, oh, something's up. And we had all these rumors that, maybe we're going to go to Europe, we're going to go to South America, we're going to do all kinds of things. And then all of a sudden we get the email that, nope, that's it, guys, we're done. And we're like, we're done forever. And it hit us in the face like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
Wow. Anybody else? Favorite, most memorable tour?
Well, I'd say for me, it was Moving Pictures in '81.
Wow.
I was never a Rush fan. I didn't even know a song they did when I went out with them. Drove the truck out, never even heard of them, and wasn't really interested. I wasn't a hard rock, progressive rock guy. I wasn't metal. That just wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
But after 3 years of going into the show, and like, wow, it just blew me away. The musicianship, and every night they were spot on. It wasn't, I wasn't messing up here. Spot on, exactly like the album, every single show. And by then we were really in our stride then in '81. And so it was, that was the best. That had to be.
Wow. Yeah. I'm envious. Anybody else?
Go ahead, Cliff.
No, I was going to say every day I had the privilege and the opportunity to do the show with them was my favorite.
That's cool.
Because I didn't know who they were when I was really young, when, they were doing their thing. But in '95, when my uncle passed, my father inherited his car, and my father said, Dad, I'll let you drive it. You're just at that age finally to where you can drive yourself. Well, go drive it. And so when I got into my uncle's car, he always spiffed up every audio system he ever had. It didn't matter what he had or where he had it, but he was always all about audio. And I get in and I turn on the car, and instantly just blaring was Tom Sawyer. And I was just like blown away. And I'm like, I'd never heard that song before. And I'm just sitting there, and this is 1995 for me. And not knowing that years to come, I was going to have that opportunity to not only be in the business of concert touring, but at the same time work for the band that I'm listening to at that moment. And so it was pretty impressive and pretty intense. And so in 2008, when on Snakes and Arrows, one of the lighting guys had to leave for a family emergency, and I came in to be a fill-in lighting guy for a couple of weeks up in Canada. And I arrived on the scene. You walk in, and you've been through different productions and worked with different bands, and you see how they operate and stuff. And right away you could just walk in and you're like, this is a family. This is a family tour. This is a crew of guys who have the older brother, younger brother, sibling personality where you pick on each other and have a whole lot of fun doing it. Cause I know Brent's big on that. He was always fun to do that kind of stuff. We all did. But it was all family driven. It wasn't anger or upset. It was just something that music and that band did that helped bring a tour of this caliber to be more family oriented than any tour and any show I've ever had the privilege of working on in my career. So that night when the show started and the sound kicked off, it just was like, just one of these things where it just kind of brought me back to sitting in my uncle's car in 1995 and just sitting there going, wow, I made it here. And then to be called back up and asked to come out and be the head carpenter for the last 2 tours. And yeah, I would say every single tour, every show that I had a privilege to do and be a part of will always be the best one, because each one of them had their own unique thing about them that day or whatever that event might be. With a band like that, you're very privileged, especially in the later days. I don't know about the earlier days, but the later days where we never did more than 2 shows in a row, and it got to a point where it was never more than 1 show in a row. So, I mean, you might have your angers of the day, but when it's all said and done, you just look at each other and go, what are you complaining about? Tomorrow's another day off. I mean, Mac didn't get that privilege near as much as some of the rest of us did, because he'd still have to be driving the trucks and get it somewhere. But it was just one of those things where, it allowed us to decompress a lot more often and enjoy the time being around each other, to get to know one another more than just being on a tour and riding the same tour bus or putting the show together. We actually got to know each other as brothers and sisters and as family members. So yeah, I'd say every day. But I will say, because we have Sebastien and we have Brent on the show, one of my most memorable days will be when we arrived in Europe and we needed to, start our rehearsals over there, and our UPS backup battery system for the automation system was not able to work on 50 hertz. And those 2 brains, along with a couple other people involved, really came together and made a very unique way of making stuff happen. And that's one of the greatest things about this industry in general that I have found compared to most others. You have to work on the fly. We don't get to push it back by a day. Oh, we didn't make it today. Hey, let's do the show tomorrow. It's problem solved now. Get it figured out. And those 2 guys did. And I'd rather leave the story to one of them to tell, because I'll butcher it, because I don't have the savvy, the complete drawing of how they made it all work. But that was still to my day one of the most unique days of the Rush tour.
I have to agree with Cliff. I'll do the first part. Brent will do the second part, I think. So let's make it a short story. We get to Europe. I open up. Back in the day, the automation control system was running on a really, really, really old Pentium processor board that had, it was running on DOS 6.22 for any old computer guy that knows what it is. And it was really, really archaic for back in the day. So pretty much when I got out there, I tried to fire up my computer, and lo and behold, the UPS doesn't boot on 60 hertz. It doesn't boot on 50 hertz, only accept 60 hertz. So I'm trying all kinds of different ways, and I can't really go direct because I can't have, like, if a light goes out during the show, it's no big deal. But if the stuff comes down and it stays down, I'm blocking the entire video wall. I'm pretty much shutting down half of the visual of the show. So it has to work. So I'm trying to figure out a way, and I can't figure it out. And then all of a sudden, these 2 maniacs from the audio department, Brent and Brad, are like, we got an idea. I'm like, what do you mean you got an idea? He's like, yeah, I'm thinking of something. Like, he's like, you can take a tone and make a 60 hertz tone, send that through one of my amplifier, and it's going to give you 120 volts. I'm like, are you nuts? And then that's when Brent can get the exact terms and everything that went through, but that was crazy. And all of that was running from my iPhone.
Wow.
So Brent, go ahead and fill in.
So the math, the science behind it is that if you take a perfect 60 hertz sine wave, which is what American electricity operates on, as opposed to 50 hertz sine wave, which is how European electricity operates. You've heard of AC power. AC stands for alternating current. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, and it goes down 60 times a second. In Europe, it only does that 50 times a second. So we took Seb's iPhone, downloaded a tone generator, put literally a headphone output of his iPhone,
which is still on my phone today,
directly into the input side of an amplifier with a line driver on it to boost it up so it was really a hot voltage, line level voltage going in to hit this amplifier. Now the amplifier is operating on 240 volts, 50 cycles, typical European amplifier. Then what you do is you slowly turn up the amplifier with a meter on the outputs of the amplifier, which will eventually give you 120 volts at 60 cycles. And then we put a plug on it, just a regular old AC plug, and he plugs his computer into it, and it works.
Fired up and did what, a month or a month and a half of touring in Europe?
What we do, 22 shows over there on that thing, on that coddled together thing. Thank you, Crown Amplifiers.
Yeah.
It's this sort of level of innovation that every Rush fan will love because we're all a bunch of geeks.
It's full on Travis W. Redfish shit there, boy.
So Brent, you've been with the band since the Vapor Trails tour. Any favorite tour of yours? Any memorable moments?
They all had their things, to be honest with you. Vapor Trails was my first. R30, because it was kind of a retrospective of their career up to that point.
Yep.
But for me personally, there was something really cool about the Clockwork Angels tour where we added the string section.
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah.
And I'm still friends with those guys, 3 of them anyway. I've seen 3 or 4 of them many times since then. There was just something the way the 3 guys worked with the 8 and then 7 string players that was really, I don't know, it was really conducive to them having a good time on stage, which is why that tour went into the second leg.
Yeah, folks, for anybody that's listening to the show and who saw the Clockwork Angels tour, one of my seats for whatever, maybe the Boston Garden was kind of side stage right or stage right. That orchestra was very close to the pyrotechnics, and I saw one of the violin players or whoever like jump back, like, whoa, the heat of that. I mean, you could feel it from the stands, but I mean, this really, there's so many things going on stage, but with regard to pyrotechnics, which you don't see a lot anymore in rock and roll, what was that like working in a pyro? And well, first off, I should say, what was it like miking or monitoring, multi-miking an orchestra on stage? Was that a challenge? And also working with pyrotechnics on stage.
Pyro. The one thing we didn't do is we didn't do explosions. We'd have 1 or 2 concussions during there was, I think, 2 points where there might have been a concussion. But for the most part, they weren't into that. They liked the visual of the flame. So, yeah, it makes noise. It comes through your microphones. What are you going to do? Turn them off? No, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So you just you do the best you can do. As far as the Clockwork Angel string ensemble goes, it was the situation where I had a completely full console already, and now I've added 8 strings. And there was a point during the show where we had to add a click for them, but the click wasn't a tape or anything like that. It was when Ged would trigger something or Al would trigger something, it would just be a click for the string section to be able to time into what was going on, because sometimes Neil hitting a stick or something like that. So it was a bit of a different perspective to come at it from a band that just plays completely organically to suddenly having 8 other players that are also trying to follow along to a set click, because they're all orchestral players and they're used to that kind of thing, as opposed to having 3 guys facing away from them. There is no conductor per se. It was a bit of a dance to get enough individual outputs on a console to make it work. It was at the time. Now it's easy with modern processing. But more than the technical side, they were just such nice people, and they fell into our little family of people. One of the things I think Matt could back up, and I know Cliffy can, is that one of the great things about those 3 guys is they knew everybody on tour. They knew the guy that drove the merch truck. They knew the guy that the brand new truck driver. They found out his name. They knew the 5th guy on the lighting crew. They knew the 4th guy on the sound crew. They knew the video guy's name. They knew everybody's name and could talk to you about something, which is something you don't experience very often, to be honest with you.
Well, I can attest to that because on the first tour I did, we went across Canada in dead of winter, and I remember backing in. I think it was Regina, and it was one of the first few shows, and I just backed in behind the stage, and Alex, they were on stage doing sound check, and I was backing the truck in to get in position to load out. So sound check ends, and Alex jumps off stage, hops up on the side of the truck, and introduces himself. And he says, "Man, I haven't seen you. Where you been? It's been 3 shows and I haven't seen you." So I go, "Well, I've been here." So he says, "Come on in the dressing room. Park the truck and come on in the dressing room." So I went in there, and it was like old home day. Just the first time in the dressing room, it was like just the guys were just great, and they were great the first day and right till the end. Great people.
I agree. I remember back, I think it was it Time Machine? The first time I brought my kids to the show in Montreal, we're sitting stage right. All my kids were behind me. I have 4 kids. I had 3 back in the day. And they're sitting right there. And there's a point in the show where Alex would just come out of the stage right, and would sit down for a little bit and breathe and relax and then go back on the show. And he comes down and he sees my kids are there. He comes right to me. He's like, "Hey, Seb, are these your kids?" I'm like, "Yeah." So he went over there, he introduced himself. He's like, "Hey, I'm Alex. I'm the guitar player." And he gives them all a pick. And the eyes on my kids were like this big. And they were going wild. And then he just went on stage. And my kids, even to this day, still remember that thing. And then I remember on R40, when we were doing rehearsal, when Neil showed up, he arrived at the venue. And I was outside talking to, I think I was with, I can't remember, one of the riggers, and he comes over to me. He gives me this huge hug. "Hey, Sam, I'm happy to see you. How are the kids? How are the family doing?" And we talked for like about, I don't know, 5 minutes. I'm like, nowadays I've been doing tons of high profile tours, and it's not like that. It's not the same feeling. It's not the same. You don't feel like you're part of the family as much as with these guys.
Why is that?
Starts at the top.
Ego?
Starts at the top.
Yeah.
I was at a dinner. Gad and Al, myself, Brad, the front of house mixer, and Scotty Appleton, the Al's guitar tech for the last 3 tours. We had this little weird, goofy wine club where we'd all go to dinner together. And we were sitting there. We were a couple of bottles in at this point, and I asked them point blank, because you could do this. You could ask them questions. I asked them, you look at the historic rock and roll world, the guys from that other from the Boston band, who have had a contentious relationship their entire career. The pyrotechnic band that wears all the face paint, they've had a very contentious relationship their entire career.
Who shall remain nameless, of course.
I'm doing my best with this.
Very good, very good.
Yeah, people know this stuff anyway, but yeah.
The band, a couple of bands from England from the late 60s and early 70s that were big then, they've always had between the main songwriters, they've always had contentious relationships.
Mm.
And I just looked at them after, like I said, 3 or 4 bottles, and I was like, how did you guys not fall into the trap? How did you not fall into the trap of the vocalist and the guitar player versus the keyboard player who's also the bass player, who's also the lead singer, but doesn't write any of the lyrics and most of the music? How did you guys avoid that? And they looked at each other, and Ged just looked at me dead in the face and said, "Well, it's because friendship is more important than rock and roll bullshit." That's the whole thing. They got to know me as a person. Before we did song 1, we had lunch. The first time I met them, they came in. We were setting everything up. We usually got a 3-day break before Ged and Al and Neil showed up, where we would set up the equipment. the first day, the first Monday they were due, they came in about 11. We all sat down and had lunch before they picked up an instrument, because that's who they are. They want to know you. They want to know that you're there for them and they're here for you and all that kind of stuff. And that's the difference.
And in all of your years of touring with other bands, Rush stands out as the band that made it feel inclusive and family-like. And that, that's what I hear over and over and over. I think a lot of Rush fans know this about the band.
I respect the hell out of that. I got to say, I mean, I've heard more stories than I can count about, this person and this person and this person. And like almost to the point where you feel like that's normal for a lot of bands and a lot of artists to just be really difficult to deal with. I've not heard anything even close to that about these guys. We've had quite a few people on now, and they've all said the exact same thing. And I think the thing about what friendship is more important than rock and roll bullshit, I think is what he said.
That was the exact term.
That's suitable for framing. It's like, I mean, people need to get that in here and they don't, and that's unfortunate.
Donna Halper has been on the show twice.
Right.
Donna's a close friend of mine, and family, right down the line.
Yeah.
So that's
that
really
comes
important.
That comes through in the music too. I feel like there's this extra thing in the music that you can't really name, but the emotion and the sincerity of it and everything that totally comes through. And I think if they all like secretly hated each other, or if it was like, like Cream, where they had to take separate limousines to the concert and that sort of thing, you can hear that in the music a little bit. You can feel that friction, and that really isn't there in any of their music. There's none of that unpleasantness. The friction is musical for them. It's not personal.
In our industry, there's always another circus you can go join.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And especially if you're good and you developed a reputation, you've got friends, you got production managers that work with you. But, Howard, 41 years. Brad mixed them for Heart of Presto and then everything after 2002, but basically started with them in about 92. Stovall was there for a bunch of years. Ian Grandy was there for a bunch of years. Skip Gildersleeve was there for a bunch of years. Scott Appleton came back. Cliff came back. I was there for 14 years. George was there for 24, 25 years. Mac was there for 37 years. You don't see that kind of longevity in crew people because, like I said, okay, I did this tour, and now next time I'm on something else, and I'm not going to go back. Nobody didn't go back that was invited. You just did not go back. Liam was there Liam is still there.
Yeah.
Liam still, I'm assuming, I don't know for a fact, but I assume Liam is still in some way, shape, or form working for GED now, dealing with their travel and their kids and everything that he's always done for them. And you don't see that kind of on both sides. We were loyal to them because we felt they were loyal to us.
Yeah, I mean, the people I've known who've worked as crew, like for other artists, like you talk to them about it, it's like it's very much a job, and they're very much there 100% for the money, and they have a few different people that they work with, and that's the deal. There is no connection, like certainly no emotional connection between them and the artist. This is the only case I'm aware of, with you guys in this band where it's like that. You never hear this. You never hear this.
Well, Dan, I told you a story of some people that I know that worked on a specific tour for a specific band. I won't say anything.
Yes.
Where the band requested that the crew people don't look at the artist. You're not to look at the performer.
What is that?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like an impossible thing to do, but they don't want eye contact. They want a degree of separation.
The one band I would throw out there that might be similar of the familial vibe, because I have a lot of friends on the tour, are Leopard. The Def Leppard guys.
Yeah, they seem really cool.
Coolest people too.
Yeah.
Robert Scoville said Tom Petty also was very good to work with.
Yeah.
But I mean, mainly what you hear most of the time is not good about most of these artists. But
Clifford, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, I always kind of joked about it, but at the same time, deep down inside, it was actually something that was always true to me, and I would tell my wife this, all the time, which matter of fact, I proposed to my wife on the R40 tour. And
nice.
as Sebastien was talking about during the break in in the show, you know, Alex would come off the stairs and walks over and goes, and straight up to my fiance at the time and goes, you're definitely going to be his better half, aren't you? And just, it was awesome. Like, he always made it a point to talk to people. But anyways, where was I going with that? Where I just, you know, I joke about it, but I actually really kind of meant it was, no matter what tour I was on at any point in my life or what I was doing, if I would always say, if I got the call for the next Rush tour, I would drop everything and go do it. Don't care what it pays. Don't care what it is. I'll go do it because there's nothing better than working for Rush. So
it's awesome.
It was kind of one of those joking things you'd say, oh man, you know, if they call up, I'll leave this tour and go do that tour. But deep down inside, I actually really kind of meant it. Like, if I got that call, I'd be gone. I'd go do it.
Yeah. You know, when I can only imagine how you guys working so closely with the band must have felt when Neil passed. And we don't have to get into we're not looking for any kind of, you know, what did you know anything? We're not interested. But how did you feel when you heard the news that Neil passed as crew people? We know, because we've heard from fans, how the fans were affected by it. I know how I felt about it. I literally was in tears about a man I never even knew. And
I was devastated. Yeah, and
there were a lot of fans like that, but were you guys affected in the same way? Did you celebrate his life in a certain way? Is there anything you'd like to share? You don't have to, but just curious.
Crushed. One of our family members died.
Yeah.
You know, and when you're on a tour that's like family, it's not just, oh, it was an artist I worked for or somebody I knew in the business. There's one of my family members gone.
Yeah. Dan, any lasting questions?
No, just this. I mean, again, it's a pleasure to hear it, like, you know, kind of reinforced what good guys these were, and that they treated you guys well, and they treated you guys with respect. Because again, you know, like I was saying before, that's so often not the case. I'm glad you guys were recognized as the professionals that you are, and as the craftsmen that you are, and I'm glad you were able to have that experience, because again, there's not a lot of that out there. So respect, definitely.
And thanks for making the shows what they were. You know,
yeah,
you always knew what you were going to get out of a Rush show. I never felt like I wasted my money. I mean, I would always, as acquiring tickets became more and more complicated, because back in the day you'd stand in a line and get a ticket, right, Mac? Remember those days? You stand in a gun. You get on an out-of-town ticket agency and buy a damn ticket in Harvard Square. That, you know, buying a ticket became more complicated. Then became extraordinarily expensive to get a ticket, even for a good seat. But I never felt like I was spending more than I needed to, wasting my money. I knew I was going to get 3 hours of just solid, impressive musicianship. On top of that, I knew I was going to get a level of aesthetic. And that's what got hooked me. That's what I got hooked on Rush in the very beginning of that Hold Your Fire tour, with the videos, the animation. And I just remember, like, wow, there's no other band like this. Even then, as we look back at the Show of Hands video, and that kind of crude animation that they would use for the video screens. But back then, for that time, that was innovative. It was synchronized. It worked with the music. And that's what I loved about Rush so much, is just that extra level of quality aesthetic that they brought to the table. And again, it wouldn't have happened without dedicated crew people like yourself. And every fan that's listening to this should kind of maybe peel away the layers a little bit more. Yes, we love Rush for their music, and we love the lyrics. We love the albums, the expansive collection of music, but it's the crew people. I mean, if you love Rush, you love Rush tours, you love Rush shows, and it's all about you guys making it happen. One last question, Brent, you're a Rush fan, right? We've talked about it. What's your favorite Rush album? Do you have one?
If you had to put a gun to my head, I'd probably say either 2112 or Hemispheres.
Cool. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I mean, obviously, you know, the popular choice amongst everybody is going to obviously be Moving Pictures, because, you know, it was Moving Pictures and it had, you know, the entire record. All 8 songs are brilliant from beginning to end, and I did a tour that played it from beginning to end, and it's it's a wonderful record, but there was something about the rawness and to be quite honest, once I learned the story, the big fuck you of 2112 that I thought was hilarious. Still do.
Anybody have a favorite Rush album? Mac, you got a favorite one? Now you're a Rush fan, right, Mac?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You're hooked now.
Oh yeah. I would say it was Permanent Waves because by that time I had gone in and had years of listening, walking in and hearing different songs and by then when that album came, I tuned into the guys, how they how they operate, and it just blew me away. It was the first album of Rush that I really paid attention to. So I would say that was my favorite.
Yeah. I'm curious, did you guys, if you were jumping on a tour and you knew a tour was coming, would you listen to the album that the band was supporting for that tour? Was that an important thing for you all to become familiar with the music of that tour?
We had to. I mean, especially, Brent, most of us, but Brent and Brad, but for Howard and me, I mean, we have to, because everything we did was synchronized to the music. So if they came out with a song and I don't know, I'm doing this part with something moves for a guitar solo, and if I do it off timing, I mean, it looks like crap.
Right.
Yeah.
It had to be dead on. So I had to know the lyrics. I had to know the songs. And obviously the audio guys is on another level, but for us, it was very important.
And Seb, since you're talking favorite Rush album, do you have one?
I have to say 2112 was also very deep for me. I really, really like it. But there's something in Clockwork Angels, especially The Garden, which I played at my weddings, if you guys remember, because we did my wedding in Vegas and I invited the whole crew. And there was something magical in that song that really, really got to me. And I don't know. I really, really like that song.
Well, it's the last song on their final album. And I mean, that guitar solo is incredible. I say that to Dan all the time. Like, I listen to that guitar solo. Just the solo itself is like, I think one of his finest works. I mean, out of all that Alex has done, that's such a powerful guitar solo. Cliff, any favorite album? You got one? You're on mute. You're on mute, Cliff. Sorry.
Sorry, guys.
No
I was bumping things around. I would say, maybe people think I'm crazy, but there's something about Tom Sawyer that just ties me back to my uncle and that story I told you earlier. So that will always probably be my number one song. But I'm with Sebastien when I would say Clockwork Angels would be my favorite album. There's something that was so unique in that sound that they had in that album that you don't hear in the rest of their albums, that you really hear the love and the passion of who those three people are come out in that album, I think. That's just my opinion.
You're now actually the third guest to cite that album as one of the all-time favorites. And the first one that we had, I was actually I like the album, but I was a little surprised the first time someone said that was their favorite, just because it's later and it's not as famous as, Moving Pictures or 2112 or whatever. But there's a lot of love for that album. And, just solely by virtue of the fact that it came later, it maybe doesn't get quite as much attention as, the classics that we all grew up with and everything. But, it just shows right to the end, to the last note, they were in it. They never phoned it in.
Yeah.
And, that the last thing they did was create a quality album like that fans can say, this is my favorite thing that they ever did. Very few bands can say that.
If you do, not to geek out on you guys, because this show is about the crew and the production, but with regard to albums and with regard to Clockwork Angels, I like Clockwork Angels more than Test for Echo and Snakes and Arrows. So I get it, because I think fans were waiting for an album like Clockwork Angels, a concept album, the continuity. And then, of course, with the musicianship and Main Monkey Business, so the solo, that's the album we were all waiting for. And to kind of end all this, what a magnificent album to end a career on. If any band ever ended on a high note, on just up here, level of quality, the way the tour ended, that final tour was heartbreaking, because I always, at the end of every tour, every Rush tour, I had optimism, and that I would know they would come back with an album, and I know the tour would come back around. And I don't have that anymore. We don't have that anymore. It's sad. So how are you guys dealing with I'm sorry for the live event industry, the state of the live event industry. I have a lot of friends in it. If there's anything people can do to help support you guys, let us know now. I know Crew Nation is a fund that is set up to help crews. I don't know if money's getting to you guys for that. I don't know where beyond kind of noting that as one dominant fund that is supporting the live event industry. I don't know the politics behind that, but it seems to be the most dominant one. Is there anything people can do to help crews, and how are you guys dealing with the COVID-19 crisis and your business?
Well, my Venmo account is.
Do it. Hey, do it. You want to support Brent? He needs, I mean, come on.
I actually don't have a Venmo account, but it's my wife is also in the industry. So we're a 2-roadie household that has basically been shut down since March. We're smart with our money. We saved our money. I actually shared a bottle of really nice champagne with Cliff the night I paid off my mortgage 5 years ago. So, we're getting along. My wife does woodworking, and she's quite good at it. I spend time cleaning the house, doing laundry, and cooking dinner. Ride a motorcycle now and again, just waiting and hoping that people will get smart and do what they're supposed to be doing to hopefully end this, the whole shutdown, lockdown thing that we're in the middle of.
For me, being a geek that I am, I kind of use technology, and I started a little 3D printing business to be able to keep up.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
But I mean, it's really, really hitting us really hard. I mean, when I moved from Rush, I went to country music. Sorry, don't hit me. And
it's cool.
And I've been with Dierks Bentley, which been very, very similar to Rush, but not on the same level, to be honest. But I mean, I was with them all the way till this thing hit, and I've been home, and I'm the same way as Brent. I mean, my wife's a full-time mom, so I'm the only revenue for the house, and I've got 4 kids. So I've been smart with money a little bit, not as much as Brent, obviously, but I did have some backed up. But I mean, if it's not picking up by like January, I'm be in deep trouble.
Yeah.
Like pretty much all of us are.
Yeah. What about you, Cliff? Any lasting words on the state of the live event industry and how you're dealing and coping with it?
Coping with it's. I think I'm in a better boat than most. I'm fortunate that my wife has a career that has kept her still working along as a architect and building hospitals. So perfect for her, the situation. And as for me, I kind of stepped off the road March 2 years ago and started working for a friend of mine who also had stepped off the road doing corporate events. And so we are as well on a hiatus as a company, but I have a boss/owner/friend who's been very smart with how he operates the company I work for and what we do. So we're getting innovative. We're figuring out other ways to make things happen.
Someone has their audio on. Mac?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty devastating. I was 3 months ago, I was supposed to go out on the Who, and all of a sudden this hit, and that was it. I've been here at the house for 3 months, and really don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. It's even with the vaccine, it's going to take this industry a long time to ramp up and get back to anywhere near what it was. And it's just like, you see all these bailouts of the big companies. And unfortunately, I think as crew guys, I think we're at the bottom. We're at the bottom. And if it doesn't, the arenas are going to get bailed out and everybody is going to be in front of us. I don't see any, until this is over, and I don't see any light. So
And with what Mac is saying, one of the things that a lot of folks don't understand is that when they see a band and they see the touring industry is just completely taking a dump, they look at it and say, oh, what are the bands going to do? Well, it's not just the bands, and it's not just the crews and the drivers and the caterers and the event staff and the people that sell the popcorn and the guy that owns the bar across the street from the arena that counts on 3 shows a month for that extra bump in his total revenues. The amount of food, the amount of hotels, the amount of parking. I mean, when you break it all down into the monies that the live entertainment industry, both sports as well as concerts and plays and theater, bring into, the money that moves around, you're talking upwards of $50 billion with a B. And, we're going to save the arenas. Well, that's great. You're bailing out Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban doesn't need it right now. Okay. And that's nothing against Mark Cuban. It's just kind of a general, that's where the money is going to go, is to the big places, not necessarily to Cliff or Mac or me or Sebs.
Right.
So not Mark Cuban specifically, but a Mark Cuban type.
Yes, the guy who owns the arena, the company, yes. The 3 or 4 big companies that own the majority of arenas,
right,
are probably going to get something in the, to help people. And that's great if you're helping the people that are actually popping the popcorn and the ushers and the event staff that's sitting, the yellow shirts we call them.
Right.
And all the people involved in putting on a show that are the $10, $12, $15 an hour folks, the stagehands, the shop steward, the electrician. I keep bringing them up, but everybody on this, from my perspective, can say there is nothing better than having a good caterer on tour.
Yeah.
True that.
And folks don't understand that, one of my absolute pet peeves is when you walk into catering, okay, great. Breakfast is breakfast. Lunch is lunch. But when I walk in at dinner time, I want silverware and I want a hard plate. I don't want plasticware. And caterers that really read the rider and really respond to those kind of things realize that I do this 200 days a year. Do you eat off paper plates at home? Of course not. And it's not just we're going to provide food for a crew. An actual good caterer, proper caterer, knows what they're doing and can make us feel like, hey, we're providing you a service that is like you're at home. Yeah. And that's what catering is supposed to be. But it goes with everybody from the tour managers, who's the second most important person on a tour right behind the band, all the way down to the local runner, the local stagehand, and the guy parking out there. Everybody's making some money. The money gets split up.
Yeah.
And that's very important.
The economy of concerts, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to keep you guys any longer. You probably have things to do and probably just tired of talking about Rush, but thank you for helping us better understand and our audience better understand what goes on behind the scenes of Rush tours, not just a tour, but Rush tours. And thank you for making Rush better. It's the best way I could put it. It's really an honor to have each of you on. And Dan, do you want to?
I just want to thank all of you for everything you did over the years. And I want to thank you now for making the time to talk to us. Because again, we're just a couple of fans and, none of you had to be here, but we appreciate it.
Yeah, we do. Definitely. And if you guys have any lasting words, now's your chance.
Where can I buy your book other than Amazon?
I'll send you
money.
I'm going to send you a copy, man. I'll send you all a copy of my book. Just email me your addresses and I'll ship you out a book. My gift to you guys.
Cool. Well, that's great.
Except for Mac, $25.99.
Well, I was actually at a bookstore and I said, looked up that book for me. And they said, well, you have to pre-order it and you have to pay up front.
Mac's like, fuck that. I'll send you a copy, man.
All right.
Yeah, well, you're in Dickie Dawson's book, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I gotta check that. I have that book. That's a great book. Wait, On the Road?
Life on the Road.
Life on the Road. There it is. Yep. Good. Another good one.
It's been out of print for 20 years.
When I interviewed him, he gave me a copy. If you guys met it, right. Dickie Dawson's a character, man. He's a great guy.
Oh, he is.
He is.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. Well, guys, I hope to see you on the road someday. You know, at a show.
Us too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Man, it's funny. I just saw a thing. You know, you get these little, because I have all my friends on social media share these entertainment news things, these little memes and sound bites. And there was one just recently. You probably saw it. It was someone set up 500 risers in a field, 6 feet apart, and the only way you could buy a ticket to the riser or attend that show is that you had to be within the same social bubble that would go into their own riser, and then the stage was set up. And it's like, oh, that's kind of that must be a huge pain in the butt to.
I'm not sure I see that taking off. I gotta say, I don't know if that really has the. That's not what people want. People want to be packed in together again for the real thing.
Well, if we can make people not smoke cigarettes at concerts, why can't we make them wear masks at concerts? And if you don't have a mask on at a concert, your ass is getting hauled out. I mean, is that going to work? Or I don't know, you know?
I don't know. You could go into there's a political rabbit hole.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
That's another 2 hours. Right there.
Cliff's looking like, I don't know. Well, thanks, guys. Rock on.
Thank you.
Keep in touch.
Thank you.
That was probably the best show we've had so far, I think, with regard to.
Epic.
It was epic.
Yeah.
You know, putting aside Rush for a moment, they've kind of struck a chord with me with regard to the state of the live event industry. If people can really put this into perspective, that yes, we are unable to go to shows because of social distancing and because of the spread of a nasty virus. But if you are somebody that loves to go to shows like I do, that has been going to concerts for 40 years, this is a very serious matter. And the economy of concerts, the concert goer, and the people who make live events happen is absolutely crushed. It is stopped dead in its tracks.
Yeah.
People everywhere are trying to figure out a way to make concerts happen again. And it doesn't, and like Mac said, Mac in the panel is the oldest of the crew. I was going to ask him, have you ever seen anything like this before? And I know he'd say no.
Right.
I've never seen anything like it. And there's a testament to that, because nothing like this has ever occurred with regard to, you know, communal gatherings, social gatherings. You know, we go to birthday parties, we go to mid-sized gatherings, you know, picnics in the park. You live in New York, Central Park. We're talking about places where people go to come together to celebrate the music that they love, that cannot do that anymore.
Right.
I just hope that this virus gets managed in the right way and will slowly fade away, because 2 years, 3 years of COVID-19 will flatten. I mean, you'll see condemnable signs on arenas. You'll just see boarded up arenas. I mean, so far 3 or 4 of my favorite clubs within my area have already shut down.
Yeah.
Like, these are venues that people that I've gone to frequently, you know. I have friends that own theaters. They don't know what to do.
Right.
So people, those who are listening, keep in mind that if there's a band out there that you still love to go see live, that this is a very serious issue, and to pay close attention to ways that you can support not just the bands, but the actual venues and crew people that make these events happen. Because without riggers, tour managers, front of house people, monitor mixers, concessions, merchandise, tour managers, all of them down the line, without any of them, none of it would happen. They're essential. They're essential. In my view, if you love music as much as I do, they are essential workers, because music makes you happy. Music makes you healthy and all that. That's my rant for the end of the show.
May I add one thing to that?
Yes.
To the people out there, if you love live music and you're lamenting the fact that it's not out there, wear a mask and get all your friends and family to wear a mask, because the way we get back to the life we were living and loved. And the way we get back to live music is everyone has to just make the sacrifice. And it's a small sacrifice, but everyone has to make this sacrifice. This is not a political show. I don't want to get too much further into this, but if you want live music back, that's what you got to do. So this is me, Dan Buckspan, saying, please do that.
You know, I agree with you. I mean, by personal choice, I wear a mask. In the beginning of all this, it made sense to me that I don't want to share the same vapor molecules that are flying out of your mouth. I mean, even on a good day, I don't want to inhale you. I don't want to inhale your sneeze. Yeah. So, I mean, if this thing's
as delightful as I am, you don't want to inhale my sneeze.
Exactly. I don't want to inhale it. I don't want any of it. So, you know, on a good day without COVID-19, maybe I'll wear a mask, you know, if a buddy's got the flu or something, who knows? But anyway, it's a terrible situation to be in for bands and for crew people and everybody, the economy around this whole machine that keeps the live event industry going. It's a real nightmare. And we're talking about a band that's done, that ended before COVID-19. But these people still, after post-Rush, still need to work and still need to support their families. This is their lifeblood and their income. So my heart goes out to each and every person that's made a tour happen and a show occur. And I have lots of friends in the industry. So anyway, on that note, my name is John Kane and
I am Dan Buckspan.
The delightful
Dan
Buckspan. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Two Guys Talking Rush. What can I say, folks? Rush rules.
Two guys talking rush. Two guys talking rush. Two guys talking rush. Two guys talking rush. Two guys.
Live music inspires millions around the world, but the concerts we all enjoy wouldn't be possible without the countless crew members working behind the scenes. As COVID-19 puts concerts on pause, we want to extend a helping hand to the touring and venue crews who depend on shows to make a living. Crew Nation was created to do just that. Crew members are the backbone of the live music industry, and we hope you'll join us in supporting them through this temporary intermission until we can once again unite millions around the world through the power of live music. Crew Nation is powered by Music Forward Foundation, a charitable 501c3 organization that will be administering the fund. Live Nation has committed $10 million to Crew Nation, contributing an initial $5 million to the fund, then matching the next $5 million given by artists, fans, and employees dollar for dollar. Please support Crew Nation at www.livenationentertainment.com/Crew Nation.